Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade. There's going to be some light spoilers for both the base game of Final Fantasy VII Remake and Intermission, which is the DLC for Remake. So if you care about that, please turn off the video now. But today what I want to be talking about is world design, level design, but mainly world traversal. And how I finished Final Fantasy VII's DLC last night, and the whole way through the base game and the DLC, my brain was just constantly thinking about how this game is really, really good in some places, and in other places it just makes me want to quit the game. Like, I came very, very close to not finishing this game, and I did. I had to force myself to finish and play the game, and that was due to some of the bad world design and level design and world traversal mechanics of the game. And it seems to get worse as the game gets going, and then the thing that really made me want to make this video is they fixed it, or as far as I can see, is they fixed it in the DLC, Intermission, where they obviously pointed it as an issue with the base game and then made adjustments to the DLC to fix the issues that were in the base game. So what I'm on about here is, in Final Fantasy VII, there are multiple points where the game makes you go into an animation locked sequence to do a thing. Climb down a ladder, jump over a wall, go along a pipe. And the animation speed for some of these things is very, very slow. And one of the reasons I think this was a thing where they didn't add a jump button in, they didn't add a climb ladder button or anything like this, is because of a development restraint due to time or whatever it may have been. I have heard from several different sources this game did have a bit of a development hell, and it was only really 2 years of proper development on the finished product. And one of the ways I think they cut out development time was to, instead of adding in jump mechanics, ladder mechanics to allow you to walk up and down ladders freely and stuff like that, is they added in these locked animation sequences where you would walk along pipes and bits and pieces like that. And there are definitely some areas of the game where these things are used to help load in the next areas of the game, but a lot of them, and I mean a lot of them, seem to be about traversing the world and trying to make the world more interesting. Now, world traversal is really hard. How do you get a character to go from A to B and make it enjoyable? You have games like Death Stranding that have their approach, and obviously some people love it and some people hate it, but genuinely, how do you get a character to go from A to B? Things like Doom, Wolfenstein fill the game with different encounters and combat, and this game does a little bit of that too, as you can see on the screen. There being encounters, and you go through and you defeat the enemies, and the same with something like Doom and Wolfenstein. But there's also games like Mario that fill the A to B, and Mario is literally a game where you go from A to B in a straight line in some cases. And the game fills it with interesting jumps and difficult challenges and puzzle solving, pretty much, where you have to figure out the best way to get through a area. And Final Fantasy VII Remake does try and do this. The issue is, it is done so poorly that it literally made me want to quit the game. And it felt so unengaging that I was just bored out of my mind doing it. Now, there are a few different sections where this happens. One is with Aerith, where you are saving and you meet her for the first time and you try and save her from the Turks. And there is a section where you have to drop lanterns, or chandeliers, sorry, from the roof, close to enemies below, to try and give her a chance to get away. But the issue is the animation and the design of that section is so roadblocky and slow that it becomes incredibly frustrating. What happens is there is a certain path that you have to grapple onto and like monkey bars over, and the actual route you have to take to get to the said chandelier is very convoluted, and like the way you have to work around the monkey bars is very slow, and it is exacerbated by the animations of Cloud going over the monkey bars. So the path you have to take, mixed with the animations, mixed with the controls not being good at all. The controls feel like they're on a grid system, but you have to wait for the animation to stop before you can turn the character to then carry on, and it feels really clunky, and you have to fight with it constantly. And this part of the game, which should be engaging and you should have a matter of urgency to it, feels really, really bad. There is this sense of urgency that you have in this area of the game that you just end up being frustrated because you're like, come on, I need to get the chandelier down so I can save Aerith and all this lot, and then you're just fighting with controls and you're waiting for Cloud to turn or get to the next set of monkey bars, and then guys start shooting at you, and the shooting doesn't actually do anything to you but a tiny amount of damage, so it's completely useless, and it just is just horrible. It honestly is horrible. And that's like, I think, is the first major implementation of like a bad world traversal ending up being frustrating. But the major point is the bit with Tifa when you enter Shinra headquarters near the end of the game. So at this section of the game, you change over to Tifa, and you are locked into trying to solve a puzzle. Essentially, or on the surface, what could be described as a puzzle. And you have to deal with an extremely slow animation and boring combination of button presses to get Tifa to jump from chandelier to chandelier. And what it ends up being is you hold forward and essentially click A now and then. And it is incredibly dull. It is incredibly dull. And it leads, at this part of the game, you are on the precipice of the final chapters of the game. You are facing down foes and saving Aerith, and really coming to the pinnacle of what this game has as is a fantastically, incredibly done story. I love it to pieces. I love the character development and the story and the progression. But this part of the game is so frustrating with animations and level design, where it is obviously just a roadblock for a player. It is a mechanic that developers have used to expand the length of this level, and it is completely useless. You have to deal with the same monkey bar mechanic as earlier, which I've already explained why that feels dreadful due to mechanics and controls and animation speed, and then it is linked into Tifa having to shuffle around chandeliers and jump from chandelier to chandelier, which is just a button press. Getting from A to B has to be engaging. It has to be engaging. Otherwise, you'll end up just walk from A to B and complete the game, and it's boring as hell. It's not a video game at that point. But the issue is that when you are solving what is a puzzle or world traversal, you have to be engaged with the player. The player has to be engaged with the systems that you are constructing. In Wolfenstein and Doom, this is done via a variety of different weapons and enemy types and ways of defeating those enemies and so on and so forth. And every encounter adds something. It could be small, it could be big, but every encounter gives you new options and new ways of killing stuff, or you having to find out new ways of killing new things. And it makes every single section of that game more interesting and engaging. And the issue here is you're just doing the same 5 to 10 second loop over and over and over again. And it's not even an interesting 5 to 10 second loop. It's literally holding forward and pressing A occasionally. And that's not interesting. So when this sequence goes on for 5 or so minutes plus, it becomes a massive issue where you're taken out of the experience and you're taken out of the world, and it just becomes boring. So at the edge of this incredible story conclusion, you are bored to death and you just want the game to get on with it. And that is bad world design, and that is bad world traversal mechanics. A game should never make you feel bored or frustrated or wanting to have to get on with it. You should feel engaged a large majority of the time, willing to explore and engage with mechanics. And when systems like this appear and level design or world traversal appears like this, you're just frustrating the player and taking them out of the world that you've crafted, and they end up not giving a damn about the story or the characters or the connections, and they just want to be like, oh, do you know, screw this, I'm putting the game, like, I can't be bothered to do this for a minute. And it's very, very frustrating. And this is only a game issue. The interactivity of video games leads to an issue that books, TVs, and movies just don't have. What you've got is interactivity, which when done correctly can just dwarf all other mediums, in my opinion, because you are physically connected to the story and characters and development via a controller or a keyboard or a mouse and a monitor. You are controlling and interacting. You are part of the story. And that is something that movies and TVs and books just can't do. It cannot do, because you're not the one doing the actions. But when those actions take you out of the world and are boring and frustrating, like the Tifa section, it has the complete opposite effect. This interactivity that could become a tool for making a link to a character or a story greater than any other medium becomes a tool to completely pull you out of it, to the point you just don't give a damn anymore. So this slow pace and this slow movement is not a bad thing all the time. There are sections where you want the game to slow down. You want the game speed to match the game's story. The pacing and the story should be something that are in tandem. When you're swinging from monkey bars and getting shot at the same time, and the monkey bars are slow and the controls are frustrating, the pacing of having to run away from a situation and being stopped by game mechanics is a direct conflict between mechanics and pacing, and it causes a head-on collision that feels bad. But in this section of the game, you've just got away from the Turks, and you are traversing rooftops with Aerith, and you're talking to each other, and you're having a back and forth and conversation, and it is a slower part of the game. And one of the things that this animation locking world traversal system that they have in the game allows you to do is not have to think about traversing the world so much. You can concentrate on the, quite frankly, incredible voice acting of this game, and you can focus on the connection that Aerith and Cloud are starting to have. They're starting to engage with each other, and you can see a relationship spawning with these two characters. And this slower, more methodical level design of going through up ladders across poles and pylons and traversing rooftops becomes nice. The pacing of the game and the pacing of the mechanics match each other, and it becomes this moment where you can engage with the story and engage with the characters. So slow world traversal is not a bad thing. It is only when your world traversal comes head on with your pacing. It's like if you were in a highway chase. And imagine your highway chase constantly slowed down every 5 to 10 seconds to a crawl as someone was shooting at you or the car was behind you or something like that. It would feel like a bad highway chase. In a highway chase, you want that speed to be consistent because it's a chase. You want to be on the edge of your seat with the guy right on your tail as they hunt you down. And what happens is if the game constantly slows you down for quick time events or slow camera pans or cutscenes, it becomes very choppy, and the pace of the game, which should be high octane action, hits a head-on collision of the pacing of the game, the world traversal and the mechanics of the game. And there's a head-on collision. It feels bad. It doesn't feel as engaging as it should do. So there are sections where the world traversal of the game definitely matches the pace, and you have these beautiful moments with characters. But you definitely have others which is it just feels like bloat and absolute trash. Intermission, I feel, looked at the issues of pacing, and they were like, yep, no, that is definitely an issue, and they seem to have fixed it. Intermission is a smaller experience. It's about 5 to 6 hours long, depending on how much side content you do, and there's areas in the game where you do have to do a sense of actual world traversal and slight puzzle solving. It's not a fake puzzle like the Tifa section. It's actually, you go over here, you trigger this panel, and then you have to go and climb up some trellises, and then you have to do a couple more panels, and then you have to figure out the right ways to go. And it is very, very puzzle light. It's not a brain teaser at all, but it is puzzle light. And the difference between this and the Tifa section is the world traversal in this section is not hampered by the animation or controls the game has in place. When you're traversing the trellis up the side of this giant energy structure, the game doesn't feel frustrating. At this section of the game, you're exploring and looking for your party's objective, and you traversing the world feels like your character is actually looking for this objective. So what ends up happening is the pace of the game and the mechanics and world traversal of the game are, again, they're matched. They're working in tandem. They don't feel clunky, and they don't feel like they're holding you back, where you're feeling like, right, I want to get on, I want to find this thing, I want to explore this area, and instead of you being like, oh, but the controls are trash and the animations are slow and it's taking forever to climb up the trellis, what actually happens is your character's moving at a good pace. Your character's movement feels a little bit more free and flows a lot better than it does in the Tifa sections and the Cloud sections. So Yuffie feels a lot more free, and you feel like you're actually engaging with the world instead of being held back by a controller. And I think that's the biggest difference with the DLC, is the whole DLC looks like they played through the base game and they wrote a notebook of things they didn't like about their world traversal and level design, and they adjusted it. They said, right, we've got a ladder here to go up to a platform to collect a box, and then a ladder down. Well, you've got to go up the ladder and then you've got to go down the ladder. Now, how about instead of a ladder, we add in a zip line? So you go up the zip line and you get the box, and then you slide down the ladder. And that means instead of you taking 10 seconds to go up a ladder, you take 2 seconds to zip up a zip line. And it feels more satisfying in the way they've done the animations and the speed of traversing the world. So you don't mind exploring. Where in Final Fantasy Remake base game, I found that I did explore, but it was a slog because I had to go up a ladder and it would take 10 seconds, then I'd come down a ladder, and then I have to go down a ladder and then up a ladder, and it was just like, ugh. Or you have to go across a pole, and Cloud would sort of like put his sword away and then like get his arms out and slowly walk across the pole. And it's like, okay, Cloud, it's not like we're in a hurry or anything, mate. It's not like a big thing is going to happen and loads of people might die. You just take your time, bro. No problems all here. Where Yuffie in her animation design constantly feels like her animations feel in pace with her objective in the game. She needs to go and find a thing. So she is going to hunt and find that thing. She runs across platforms and poles and across trellises like she's a ninja, because she is a ninja. Where Cloud, as a elite soldier, he walks across poles and across world terrain like he's a 90-year-old woman with crutches. And it is really, really frustrating. But this is what makes me so excited about the next installment of the Final Fantasy VII Remake saga. Is I played the base game and I was frustrated by the end of it. I said, that story is fantastic. The combat is off the hooks. When I figured it out, I was like, okay, I get this. It's great. Their combat design, their boss encounter needs some work, but genuinely, the hard stuff is really, really good. But what they did with the DLC is they looked at the issues the game had and they tried fixing them, which makes me excited for the next installment of the game, because it makes me feel like they're going to try and fix the other issues that may be with the game, which is fantastic, because in 3 parts time we could end up with just an insanely solid game. If they can make part 1, which was fantastic in some areas and not so great in others, and then they can carry across the good things to part 2, and then they can fix the stuff that's not so great, and they can really refine it so that in part 3 we end up with a game that is the best of parts 1 and 2 plus DLC, and you just end up with this incredible experience to finish the finale of just incredible saga. So Final Fantasy VII has its issues with its world traversal and getting from A to B. It really has its issues. But the thing that makes me excited is they fix those issues in the DLC, and I'm really looking forward to them fix other issues that are in the game as well. Thanks for listening to my rants, guys. I really appreciate that, and I will see you again soon in some other videos. Ta-da!